webinar.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. This may be a new paradigm. Maybe a new paradigm.
So true.
So we'll just, because people can all hear us now. I know, so I'm going to wave hi to Lexi, who I know, one of our employees who's on watching. So good morning, Lexi. And I just confirmed with her that she can hear us, so that's good. So why don't we give it just another minute? I know we've got more people joining, which is great. And we'll get started. So again, I hope, my name is Eric Luden, founder and owner of Digital Silver Imaging, with my partner, Andrea Zaki, up there in the corner, who's going to kick things off here. We're excited to have you all with us for this, this webinar on how to run a successful Kickstarter campaign. So Andrea, with that, why don't you get things started?
Sure. Well, welcome everybody. I want to thank you all for joining us today on this webinar. I'm really excited to have Barry Schneier and Lou Jones here with us today. Actually, all of us here on the screen have run a Kickstarter campaign before. And the purpose of this webinar is to inform you what our challenges were with the Kickstarter campaign, maybe inspire you to run your own Kickstarter campaign, or if you're just curious on what's involved. Welcome, and that's what the whole point is. So I want to introduce our two guests. So the first, I'm going to introduce Barry Schneier. Wave to the folks out there, Barry. So that's Barry, and Barry started his career a while back. You know, being of the same generation, we don't like to divulge a lot of that information, but let's say that he's a veteran in the business, and specifically as a photographer and a writer. And he's worked with musicians in Boston and San Francisco and LA, and also worked in the world of video and film production and commercials, documentaries. But Barry's Kickstarter, as he'll tell you today, is all about his experience in some of the groundbreaking moments in rock and roll. And Barry also is a fine artist, and he has work he's represented by the Morrison Hotel Gallery and the Proud Gallery in London. And he has work in numerous locations, including Paramount Studios, CBS, MTV, New England Folk Archives, and the Bruce Springsteen Archives, and Center for American Music, among a few. So welcome, Barry.
Thank you.
Our other guest is Lou Jones. And wave Lou, just in case the people are getting confused here. And what can I say about Lou? Again, I've known Lou for longer than we probably both want to admit. And Lou, and I don't say this slightly, is a living legend. Lou has been a photographer that has basically spanned genres, commercial, fine art, music, documentary. In fact, I think, Lou, you refer to yourself as a photo documentarian.
Absolutely.
And, Lou has done, commercial campaigns for all the huge companies that you can imagine, Nike, FedEx, you name it, Lou's done it. He's been in Time Life magazine, and Nat Geo, Paris Match. He's done long-term projects on jazz, the Civil War. He's probably got 4 or 5 projects going right now. I know that his Kickstarter is all about the Pan-Africa project, which Lou started, which is all about bringing, and correct me if I make any mistakes here, Lou, about kind of bringing the world's image to a kind of a contemporary standard on what Africa is about. Africa is more than just safaris and exotic locations. So Lou has tried to shed light on the day-to-day of Africa. And Lou's goal, I believe, is to visit every country in Africa. How many countries so far, Lou?
We've done 14, but the COVID has really put a crunch on that. We've done 14 so far.
And document it that way. Lou has also been president of the New England chapter of ASMP. He's involved with many arts organizations, the Griffin Museum. He's on the board of the Social Documentary Network, and lots of others. So I could go on and on about Lou, but welcome, Lou.
Thank you so much. Now I have to live up to what you just said.
You've already done it, Lou.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so I'm going to turn it over now to my business partner, Eric Luden.
All right, we're going to pop this little piece up here that Andrea put together. Andrea, were you going to talk about this slide at all, or?
Well, yeah, let me just give another brief introduction here to what Kickstarter is all about. I know that there's, people have preconceptions. If you've never done a Kickstarter project or never supported a Kickstarter project, what is Kickstarter? What is the purpose of Kickstarter? And I think that this quote by De La Soul, one of my favorite bands, is kind of sums it up very nicely. It says, we see Kickstarter as a home for creative minds and a wonderful platform where people who believe, respect, and see the vision can support an idea and make it a reality.
Excellent. I'm just going to talk briefly about the different crowdfunding platforms out there, because there are numerous platforms. There are more than these four, but I just want to address these four. Kickstarter is kind of like the largest and best known platform that's out there. They're like the Kleenex brand of facial tissue, if you will. That's what everybody refers to, even when they're referring to just crowdfunding. Kickstarter works where you set up a very specific goal or that you want to raise a specific amount of money, and you are setting reward levels for donors based on the amount that they donate, and that can vary. Kickstarter is kind of known as an all or nothing platform, meaning if your goal is $25,000 and at the end of your campaign, which most lasts 30 days, you do not raise the 25 and you've only raised 20, none of your backers get charged and you get nothing. If you meet or exceed your goal, then all of your backers are their money gets sucked out of their credit card or however they've paid. There's a 5% fee that Kickstarter takes from the money that you've raised, plus there are processing fees on top of that, which usually range anywhere from 2.5% to 3.5%. The other platform is Indiegogo. When I first looked into Indiegogo, they had a slightly different fee structure. They're still done similar to Kickstarter. They don't call theirs rewards, they call them perks. So that's just a different terminology, but again, you're setting different tiers for people based on the amount that they give. And they have what's called a fixed or a flexible funding platform. So the fixed platform is almost identical to Kickstarter, meaning that you say, I want to raise $25,000, and if you don't raise it, nobody gets charged and you don't get anything. And then there's a 5% fee plus their processing fees. When they originally started, which I thought was interesting, was Indiegogo had a model where they actually, with your flexible funding, if you didn't hit your goal, again, with the $25,000 example, you still got funded. But in the old days, they took 8% instead of 5%. So they seem to have changed their model recently, which I was unaware of. So they're now charging the same amount almost as Kickstarter. So I'm a little confused at really the unique difference between these two. Patreon is a slightly newer platform. This is done as a subscription donation sort of project where you pledge a certain amount per month to somebody, and they tend to be for longer term projects. I know a lot of musicians and other people are using them who are on a long-term project. And the perks are more of like special access and to maybe limited music or conversations with artists and things like that. A little bit lower processing fees with that, but again, again, a slightly different model. And then the last one is everybody's kind of heard about is GoFundMe. And really, if you think about the term of GoFundMe, they're really for special campaigns that are really related to charitable projects. Some of the successful ones have raised millions of dollars for very specific cases like cancer research or things like that, or personal things where somebody maybe had something stolen that they're trying to replace. So again, and their fees are low. But I think what we're really going to address today is kind of more of what Kickstarter and Indiegogo offer. And as Andrea mentioned in the beginning, all digital silver imaging and Barry and Lou have all run Kickstarter projects. But I think the things that we're going to be talking about today apply to kind of whether you do Kickstarter or Indiegogo. So I'm going to give it back to Andrea. Going to talk a little bit about Barry, again, about this project, and then Barry can take it from there.
Well, I'm just going to kind of, this image that you're seeing on your screen now, that's the title of Barry's project. So I'm just going to turn it over to Barry and let him take it from there. So Barry, it's all yours.
Thank you, everyone. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. So the basic thing was I had been doing some work based upon my previous work with Bruce Springsteen by doing some exhibiting, some sales, some writing about it. And I had formed a relationship with Backstreets Magazine some years ago. And Chris Phillips, the editor, had approached me at some point saying, you know, I'd love to really do a book with you. And I thought that was a nice idea. So probably about 4, 5, 6 years ago, I began the process of writing the book. And when we were getting close to feeling it was a book, we thought that, you know, how we basically had to fund it. Now, Chris approached me with the idea of doing it on Kickstarter. And the reason he wanted to use Kickstarter was because it's a community-based, fundraising effort where we feel that, you know, celebrating the arts with the community makes a lot of sense, especially where music and especially Bruce Springsteen has a large community. We thought it'd be the perfect avenue for it. What I had done previous to that in the writing process is I was doing a lot of one-offs, writing sort of what became chapters about some of the photos, some of my experiences, posting them on social media. So I like I said, I spent a good few years writing the book, really finding the story arc before it was really ready to go. When we were ready to launch, or should I say, as we decided we were going to use Kickstarter, I did some research. And I have to admit, I learned right off the bat that Kickstarter is a lot more than just one day announcing your campaign and going, and then seeing who contributes after that. Really what Kickstarter is, at least from my experience, is a very thought through, strategized marketing plan that you really have to begin many months before you actually launch your campaign. One of the things that I learned that I thought was very advantageous to our plan was to basically, since it's a social driven, community driven platform, is to really reach out to everybody you know that I would call influencers or people that have large followings in social media. And what you do is these are people hopefully you have a relationship with, and you tell them 2 or 3 months before the project, you say, you know, I'm thinking about doing this project. When I launch it, would you share it with people? Would you tweet it out? Would you post things about it? And what you do is you basically tabulate a list of all your possible contacts, and you keep it up with them throughout the process. You tell them how they're doing. You might even email them photos or design ideas or things, and even ask for feedback as the process goes. So what you're basically doing is building an entire audience before you actually launch. So by the time the day comes where you launch your project, you actually, at one point, put an email out saying, we're live, we're there. And at that point, your list of people that you have accrued over the time is now ready to receive your information and then share it with their constituents. So hopefully right off the bat, you've got the classic, social media, what's called the echo effect. You say it, someone else hears it, they share it with someone else, they share it with someone else, and you get that exponential reach. So we did that right from the beginning, and knowing that was the way to go. One of the things that I would like to comment on that's very important also is when you develop your Kickstarter campaign page, and by the way, Kickstarter is a great platform for leading you through all the ins and outs of creating a good face to the audience. There are a couple of things that are very important. One is, you want to have a budget that is reachable, so people who contribute to it will feel like this is achievable. Second, you obviously want to have some good rewards, things that are unusual and unique just to that project, which makes it special. And the third thing is you basically have to have it something that's that you feel is going to get recognized by many and hopefully shared with others. And one of the ways you do that in communicating is by creating a great video. I had heard a lot, as a matter of fact, when I was working on this with Eric, who was Digital Silver Imaging, was a great supporter of us as we developed it. We talked about the importance of a great video. I was lucky to be involved with some friends of mine who are excellent video producers that do commercials locally, and they helped me produce the video that basically kicked it off. Because we're a visual society. We like motion video a lot as well. So if we see a video on the screen, the first thing we're going to do is play it. And what you want to do in your video is kind of make sure within the first 30 seconds, you tell them what you're doing, what you're looking for, what you're after. So oftentimes people may watch the first 30 seconds to a minute of the video and go right away to the pledge part. So we put together a sizable list, and luckily working with Chris Phillips and Backstreet, he was in touch with like music journalists, music writers, people that were in the industry, and they would be able to share the information with their constituents as well. We also set what I would call a moderate budget, and we set a moderate size of publications to do, because we want it to be achievable. Because we also learned that, people who are into Kickstarter and into supporting it will often track a project and may not support it or put money into it until they know the project is funded. So we would try to create a budget that was doable. Again, we had no idea how we were going to do. We were very fortunate that, our first day out, we had a very strong day. Second day was so-so. I actually kind of got a little nervous, but that evening I got an email from Kickstarter that we had been selected as a project we loved. So that gave us some more, some more cachet as we marketed it, and they began marketing it themselves. Of course, we were fortunate to have people, even, the Springsteen camp with Columbia Records, even do a little tweeting about it as well, which didn't hurt. Very exciting was by the 6th day, we hit our goal, which was very surprising to us. And so we just kept going from there, adding what was called stretch goals, adding enhancements to the book. So by the time our pledge period was completed in 30 days, we had basically achieved 348% of our budget at 1,001 backers, and had a very successful campaign. And actually that year was the #2 most popular photo book on Kickstarter in the US.
Barry,
Mm-hmm.
What was your original goal?
The original goal was $32,000 with the idea of printing 500 copies.
So you $32,000, and you raised 109.
Right, and we printed 3,000 books.
Wow, that's really amazing. So I just have a question. How much do you think that your basically collaboration with Backstreet's magazine and other entities contributed to the attainment of that goal?
I think the collaboration with Backstreet's is what made it successful, because they have a large audience. They have a large following, international following. We had backers from all over the world. Plus, Chris Phillips, the editor, has great relationships with people in the band, people in the management, people in the music industry. So they were very glad to talk about the project as well and give us some social media noise, as you want to say.
And that's an amazing campaign. And for the folks that have not seen your Kickstarter project, could you just give them a brief overview of what the focus of the book is about?
Sure. Many of you, and some of you who may not be big Bruce Springsteen fans, have probably heard the story about how in May of 1974, he performed a show in Cambridge where he opened up for Bonnie Raitt. And he was relatively unknown to a lot of people at the time, known to some, but seriously not a known entity. His first 2 albums had critical success, but from sales, they were doing poorly. His label was Columbia Records, was actually thinking about dropping him. He had 1 more album in his contract, and the band knew that things were kind of dicey out there, and they had been performing up and down the East Coast. And I had seen them in a local bar, and I was very impressed with the band. I had been working with some local promoters, and I had suggested that they put Bruce on a show. So they booked Bruce to open up for Bonnie at the show at the Harvard Square Theater. They had not intended on having an opening act that night. The bottom line was John Landau was in the audience that night, writing for the Real Paper. John was also writing for Rolling Stone at the time. He wrote that famous quote, tonight I saw a rock and roll future, and its name is Bruce Springsteen, as a result of seeing that concert. The label picked up on that quote, turned it into a heavy marketing campaign, breathed new life into his call it his record sales careers, and basically gave him a little more runway as far as getting his career going, and things really turned well after that.
So really, until this night, Bruce Springsteen was kind of just like a, even though he did have a record contract, he was kind of a regional, local act, kind of performing around, didn't have a lot of critical acclaim.
He had a diehard following, but albeit not that very big. Obviously, New Jersey, the Northeast, and Texas, some states out west. But he was still just out there on the road playing bars, trying to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people have looked back at this night as being an important night in his career, and we decided to capture the essence of it in my photography and writing about it.
Barry, I just wanted to ask Barry before we move on to Lou, in terms of how you structured your rewards, because I think that's an important thing that people get hung up on. Can you talk a little bit about the rewards, how you came up with them, and any strategic decisions you made throughout the campaign?
Sure. Well, one of the things we decided to do, there were two things we decided to do. We wanted to make one reward basically the price of the book. So you weren't paying much more than you'd pay for it once it was for sale. And we actually structured it so a certain level of people could get it at a discount. Then we added a little bit more to it if they wanted to get a signed copy. But the real bonus, as far as the structures of the rewards go, was the idea of creating prints as rewards. As you mentioned, my work is sold in some galleries, and we typically sell them, as fine art silver prints. And usually, the smallest size I sell is 11 by 14. And I'm always getting requests for small prints. I'm always getting requests from people who don't have the money that a gallery commands at a sale. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to make call it a special set of prints, of 8 by 10 prints of some of the more recognizable photos that I have available only to the Kickstarter backers. So at a certain level, you could get a book and one print, get a book and 2 prints, get a book and 3 prints, pick the ones you want. And what we made it very clear was these 8 by 10s are only available for Kickstarter backers and only available during the time of the campaign. So when those 30 days were over, those prints are no longer available and haven't been available since. So people who wanted to get a print and couldn't afford the high prices could get one now. And also there's that sort of exclusivity that you get it only during this window as a Kickstarter backer.
That's great.
Great. Thank you, Barry.
Yeah, thanks, Barry.
And I want to just mention, Eric, before we move on, we're going to have Q&A at the end. So folks, if you go into your controls for Zoom and select the chat feature, you will be able to enter your questions into the chat. And if you can't see the chat now, you might want to use your mouse to find that.
Okay.
But so let's move on to Lou. And Lou has actually done 2 Kickstarter projects. And Lou's going to tell you all about it, but it's kind of unique approach. So Lou, take it away.
I'm impressed by the success that Barry had. Our experience was very, very, very different. We began, as some people, maybe few people that have looked in, my studio, we don't have any employees sitting behind me anymore because COVID has closed us down pretty much, but they're usually people behind me. We started this campaign almost 7 years ago to photograph all 54 countries in Africa because of the negative impression that Western media has on Africa in general. They only look at poverty and pestilence and conflict. And I had been many times and said, this is, to be very political, this is sort of neo-colonialism, and that many parts of Africa look exactly like downtown Cleveland or Cambridge or whatever it is. And that message has to get out. So we started the project using, as I have for all of my long-term projects, or many of my long-term projects, I take that back, many of them, not all of them. We're using the commercial component of the studio to pay for trips to go over there. But after a couple of times and proving that it was possible, because we didn't even know if Pan Africa Project was even possible to begin this project. It went through many iterations for years and years and years, discussing it with other photographers, with curators, with travel people as to whether or not this was even possible. Anyway, we started, did a couple of the countries, and then we had to look for ways to fund this. And that's very complicated. Now, we are now, in a funny kind of way, very fortunate because of computers and technology and the internet, able to finally rest being published, having people see our work by using the internet and sort of pushing a lot of the gatekeepers, a lot of the editors and curators out of the way for people to be able to see our work. So that was the basis for the platforms we used to do Pan Africa. But to get to Kickstarter, we realized we had to find ways, and this is, these Kickstarter, GoFundMe, Indiegogos have provided artists, let me back up a little, have provided creative people with a completely different way to raise money, which was never available before. So this ability to be able to be our own fundraisers through our own efforts is a completely new thing. And so we looked at that as a studio, and I didn't want to do this in the beginning. It was really, really, just didn't sit right with me. But we realized that the cost of doing Pan Africa was so enormous that we really had to look at other vehicles. So that's how we started. We've done 2 Kickstarters. The first one, literally to see if it could work. And then the second one, Kickstarter showed us that if you did a successful campaign. Now, one of the things that you haven't talked about is that most Kickstarter campaigns fail. And that's something that people, it's not put your name up, put your project up, and people will send you money. You really, really, and Barry talked about that, we really have to work. So we worked very, very, very hard and did the second one. We're selling something very different from Barry, and that is we're selling smoke and mirrors. We're selling the ability to go and to do a project which many people who gave us money may not be all that interested in. So we had to use the rewards as to provide. The prints were for the first one. We sold portfolio. We actually sold 2 or 3 of those, which blew my mind. My tech guy said, we can do this. It was a large amount of money. We sold a couple of those. And then individual single prints, different sizes, different images. And then for the second one, we based it around, because everybody kept saying, when are you going to do a book? I said, I'll be 117 years old when we finish this project. So you may have to wait a while to get a book. It sounds funny, but the logic was easy in the fact that by the time I do 54 countries, it may be a while, even if we accelerate like we were hoping. But what we did was we provided with literally, it came in last week. Finally, the book is in the studio. It's printed after many delays, and it's a volume. So we volumized it, and we raised almost, with all the extra contributions from people who didn't want to be involved with Kickstarter, we raised almost $50,000 for the second one. And it paid for at least 2 trips and the publishing of this book. So,
Lou, can I ask you a question? So you said that you raised money outside of Kickstarter.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, Barry, keep me on this because I'm going to get a little. Barry said that he was able to use the with the publisher and their mailing list, almost everything we did was internal. So I have spent my entire career, because I'm a commercial photographer, developing a very large Rolodex. We still call it that. You know, a lot of the people on the online probably don't even have an idea what that is, but which is a mailing list, clients, friends, people who've taken workshops, people who have bought other books from me, etc., assistants, things like that. Anyway, so your question is, when we decided to use Kickstarter, it's a hard decision to use Kickstarter because it's all or nothing with them. And that's a really pretty frightening thought. When we decided to use them, we were almost internal to our network, to our Rolodex.
Gotcha.
But a lot of people said, wrote me, emailed me, we do not want to get involved with Kickstarter for a lot of reasons. One is they didn't like the internet. They didn't like putting their information out to people. They didn't want to get involved. It was too complicated. You know, old people like me, you know, I can barely turn the computer on. So they didn't want to get involved with this technology. So many of the people sent us money directly. So I got checks. So we say that almost $50,000 was involved because people literally sent us money in the form of just a regular check. One guy took me out to dinner and handed over a check over dessert and coffee, that kind of thing. So people were involved and were interested in the project. I think we through the unbelievably complex and thorough metrics that Kickstarter does, we've realized that about almost 30% of the people that contributed were people we had never heard of and were from places halfway around the world. So they were interested somehow in either Africa or getting involved with these sort of subject matter or the approach that we were. So that was really very, very complicated. But yes, we did get a number of checks that helped us greatly.
I think that you hit on a really good point there too, Lou, is in our Kickstarter, we had a very similar experience. And actually Kickstarter was also, you know, besides, you know, funding our project, was a tremendous promotional vehicle.
Yes, and that was sort of one of the main reasons we went with Kickstarter, was that they had this already, so it had this sort of cachet that because Kickstarter allowed you to do it, people had a trust in the system, which was promotional. But they don't promote. We did get, like Barry said, he got picked up by some outside organization, but we got picked up by an organization that does website design, very well known, and they put it up as being a featured article on theirs, and that had a significant influence on contributions.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So Lou, unless, I don't want to cut you off, but unless you have something else that you know that you're thinking about in the Kickstarter campaign, I just wanted to ask you one more question before we kind of moved on. I have a couple of slides.
Surely.
Then we'll get quickly to the Q&A. So your campaign is kind of very different than what Barry did in a way, because even though your second campaign was around a book, your first campaign was pretty much to fund the production of this project, correct?
Both of them were to fund going to Africa. And that's very different. It's a completely different mindset for, you know, but one of the, and I don't like the word reward either. One of the perks was to a pre-sell the production of a book, and that was a part of that. But we went at least to 2 countries, maybe 2.5, on the on the second Kickstarter.
Right. So I don't know if, you know, just for our audience out there, you know, Kickstarter has to approve your project. If your project doesn't meet the parameters of what Kickstarter says, they don't approve it. In fact, the first time, I know we were talking about this yesterday, the first time that Digital Silver Imaging submitted their project to Kickstarter, they turned us down.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, so, you know, I think, Lou, I think your first project was pretty interesting and pretty unique because you really kind of walked that tightrope, I think, with Kickstarter on that project. But it just goes to prove that, you know, it can be done. And I also think another thing that both of you alluded to is that a great resource is the Kickstarter. And I know that the Indiegogo site is like this too, but basically they give pretty in-depth information on what you need to do. And they both emphasize, and I know all 3 of us, we put a lot of time and effort into our videos. And I know that all 3 of us pretty much said the same thing about the video, is that after about all 3 of our videos are about 3 minutes, because that's also what Kickstarter recommends.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, we got people pledging at about the halfway point in most of our videos. Do you guys concur with that?
Yeah, we found that a lot of our pledges came directly from the video, and oftentimes, like you said, we found people were turning off the video after being a third in, and they said, "Yep, I get it," and they went right to the pledge, which was great. Which is not uncommon with a lot of videos that you find if you have a way to track viewing, you find out that a lot of short videos, people after, especially stuff that's on the internet, people after a minute and a half, they get it, they're gone. So make sure you have everything in that first minute.
Yeah. So Eric, can we go to the next image, the image of the charts? So there are a couple, Digital Silver Imaging, I forgot all about us.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll make this quick. So we did a Kickstarter basically to build our black and white silver gelatin processor for our DSI digital silver prints. So before we could only print up to 20 inches and we wanted to print up larger, 50 inches, but there wasn't a real good solution to process the kind of paper we use. So we realized we needed to custom design a processor. Our original goal was $45,000 and we raised $50,000. I think we had a very similar experience in a lot of ways to what you know, Barry and Lou said. I do want to emphasize the point that a Kickstarter project, at least for us, was almost a 24-hour-a-day affair for the 30 days that our project ran. You have to be on top of it all the time. You have to be on social media. You have to be responding to people that are logging in and asking questions via your campaign. You know, it is a commitment, and that's what you have to be ready for. You can't just say, oh, let's just run a Kickstarter and I'll raise the money. Like Lou said, most of the projects fail, and to make a successful project, you have to do all the front end work. So I know people want to ask some questions, so let's get on. Eric, I'm sorry. And there's our processor. That's our, I call it Frankenstein. There's a bunch of chains and rollers and stuff that we designed kind of from scratch from a bunch of old processor parts, but that's another story. So here are a couple of infographics. Kickstarter, Kickstarter gives you lots of great ways to track your campaigns, and so does Indiegogo and the others. But there are also outside websites that'll help you track it, and this one is called KickTrack. They're still around. And Eric, let's go right to the next one. But this is, they give you some really great graphics. This graphic, I think, is really important, and I'll explain it to you quickly. That blue line on the bottom is our pledges, like the amount of money we gained. You can see in the beginning, it's kind of a very flat, steady curve. That green line on the top is the projected goal, is what you're trending towards. So you can see, and I think that we all agreed that we all had this experience, the first couple of days of your project, you've got all the people that you've been talking to about your project, they're all excited about it, and they contribute first day. Plus, typically you have, whatever you want to call it, rewards or promotions that are quote unquote a better deal than others. So your book might be less expensive, and those sell out, or all those pledges are taken quickly. So in the beginning of your Kickstarter, you're looking at it and you're saying, man, we're not going to hit 45,000, we're going to hit 100,000. But about day 3, you can see there's a precipitous drop. And, we were looking at these infographics and saying, what's going on? And we realized we really had to kick it up. If you look about halfway through there's a big spike. One of the people that we reached was a customer of ours who happened to be also a writer for Forbes magazine online. And he did a post about us. And that kind of re-energized our campaign along with more promotional efforts. So I just think that's a real interesting graphic to go to. So at this point, what I think, given the time, I would like to open it up to questions. I think, Eric, you've already gotten a question.
Yeah, there are a couple questions in here. Let's see here. So this was a question for Lou and Barry from Lynn, and she asked, did you go to publishers first? And how did the financials work out after all the costs?
Okay, well, I guess in my sense, I started with a publisher, being Backstreet's Publishing. Now, Backstreet's began as a print publisher in the 80s and then went all digital, occasionally doing some magazines. When Chris and I discussed the project, Chris, having come from a print background, had told me that he was interested in getting back into print, getting back into books. So he thought this would be the perfect project to kind of initiate the Backstreet's publishing empire's re-entry back into books. So in one sense, I had a publisher already. So I never needed to go through the process of trying to find a publisher. So I think in my case, I began with that. It's interesting because in the world of what's called self-publishing, I've learned a lot, especially as we try to market the book afterwards. You've got, of course, the big publishers, and they have, everybody working with them. And then you have independents, which is kind of what the Backstreet's is. But self-publishing, which is what a lot of authors do and photographers do with Kickstarter, it means you've got to do everything yourself. So we were fortunate. Had I not gone that route with a publisher, I don't know if I would really know exactly what to do.
Yeah. How about you, Lou?
Well,
for the second, I guess for your second campaign,
Yeah, we came into this a little, very, very, very differently because we were essentially trying to fund trips, to fund more content about doing the, so publishing was because we were reacting and using the book as a vehicle for reward.
Yeah.
And that came after much discussion inside the studio. Since publishing wasn't the primary goal was trips, we had over the last 5 or 6 years in my commercial career had been asked by clients to become a publisher. So we published several books for clients. So it was just a sort of a natural extension of what we had already been doing to publish this because it was a small run. I think we published 600 books for as rewards.
Yeah.
But we did all the metrics ourselves. How much it was going to cost. We went to designers. How much you're going to charge us. We went to printers. How much you're going to cost. And we did all of that just like we would do for a client, for a client who wanted to publish a book. And but no, we did not approach publishers beforehand. If we do it again, we may do exactly that, but no, we have not gone to publisher. We did not go, and we became our own publisher.
So you self-published?
Yes, but we did all the ISBN numbers and all of that, went to, you know, so that it can go, we can do republic, we can do reprints. Yep. And have all of that done. Yes.
Yeah, Stephanie had asked that question about.
Yeah. What about them? Yeah, Eric, I'm sorry. I think we're asking the same question.
Yeah, and then the other, just to let people know that, so there is a chat screen, and then there's also a Q&A thing at the bottom, which you're welcome to put your questions into, and Andrea and I will try to answer them. I do want to, since the question was asked about the video, I can't emphasize enough how important the video is to the success of your campaign. And I know Barry, Barry mentioned that he had the help of some people who were professional video people. It's not that you have to hire professional video people, it's that your message has to be clear and concise. And really, my suggestion to everybody, and it's what we did, and I'm sure Barry and Lou did, is make your friends watch it. And make sure your friends are really honest. People are always telling you're wonderful, maybe don't show them the video. You need to need really sharp constructive criticism, because that video is, I can tell you that our video is still the most watched video that we have on the internet. And you have to have the ask, what it is you're asking for, clear and upfront. Like Barry said, some people don't get beyond a third of your video. And if your message isn't clear and concise, I can't tell you how important that is.
Eric, so Nikki, as a follow-up question for Barry, and her question, or his question is, I think, if one has the ability to fund their own book, do you think the Kickstarter would still be the way to go for promotional value?
I think there's some value in Kickstarter being promotional, because there is a built-in audience with people that do follow Kickstarter to see what's out there, what's new. Some people actually shop on Kickstarter. We were talking about that the other day. So there is some value in that. There is some value in the fact that there are people that watch Kickstarter projects. When our project was out, excuse me, there was some photo blog or online photo magazine that picked up on it and wrote about it. But the world of book promotion is tough. There's a lot of books out there, simple as that. And we found that once the book had been done and we were starting to do book talks, whatever, that we still were always, I won't say fighting an uphill battle, but we still were fighting, for shelf space. We still were fighting for, to have our book be mentioned, have our voice be heard. So we post Kickstarter just took on a serious undertaking by just approaching every avenue we could, people even like Publishers Weekly. And we're fortunate that some places that are very selective on talking about books would talk about ours. But I don't know what the answer is to great book promotion. I do know that Kickstarter will give you a good start, and you'll certainly get some buzz as a result of that. What I don't know is, once you're done, is there much, does having a successful book on Kickstarter give you enough cred that if you went to a bookseller or if you went to a book distributor, would they say, oh, well then let's talk about that? I do know when I was speaking to some local press, I often would hear, like, I get 100 books a week on my desk. So that's kind of what you're up against.
Yeah. I don't know. I want to get Lou's feedback on this too, because I saw him, there's a little disagreement here. But just my background is, before I've been in photo, I left photo to go to design, and then I started my own publishing company, and then I left that. So I have quite a bit of experience in the publishing world. And what happened in 2008 in publishing is most publishers cut all of that promotional budget except for their largest projects. So for traditional publishers, and kind of to get to maybe Nikki's question, I think if you have a pipeline where you're constantly going to be promoting your book, so let's say you're doing photo workshops and talking all the time, and that's your avenue for selling your book, then I don't think you might not need a Kickstarter, basically. And also, if you also have the financing for your book up front, you might not need a Kickstarter. But once you promote your book, unless you have a publisher that's really dedicated to promoting that book, I think that Kickstarter is a pretty good vehicle. I think that you're going to sell through at least that first printing, and then maybe the second printing of the book if you get there. That's another way to approach the public. And Lou, so what do you think?
No, I don't think that Kickstarter is a good vehicle for promotion of, they even say it. They say that, we're not here to promote your project.
Right.
And it has not become, we have so many things. And so we did not find any, we got a bump because we chose Kickstarter because of that bump. But their add-on is not significant to us small pipsqueak people, especially in our case, where we have a subject matter and a product that nobody cares about. We were using this to fund something that was an uphill battle right from the very beginning.
Yep.
We had a follow-up question from Lynn, I believe, who said, let me just read this, I'm sorry. In terms of the effort and time and energy that was put into Kickstarter and the distribution of the book, did Kickstarter actually make you money? And in terms of that, and generally, my experience.
In terms of commercial money, in terms of commercial money, it didn't. No, yes, Kickstarter made more money. It surprised the hell out of me. $50,000 may not sound like a lot of money, but it's tremendous money in the case of us doing these projects. We could not have gotten that kind of money in any other way possible. And it literally paid for a couple of trips, me and assistants to go to Africa, and the book. So if that's the case, using it as a money-making venture, no, it did not. It did not put a lot of money into. We used all the money for the projects and for the book and for the paying salaries here, but it didn't put any. I don't have any. I'm not buying a home because of Kickstarter.
Okay, so maybe I'm going to tell you I'm a little new to the webinar thing. So Lynn Goldsmith has raised her hand, so I'm going to click on allow her to talk.
Okay.
Okay.
This is wonderful, wonderful, Lynn.
Lynn, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, and maybe it's my own fault, but my question seems not to be clear because I'm not getting the answer that I think not only I'm interested in, but I would think anyone listening to this would be interested in.
So try to rephrase it.
I've had 14, or you may not know, I know. I've had 14 books published by publishers. So my question really was, after you put in all of this time and effort, and Lou, I totally understand your goal in doing the Kickstarter was not for the book, but to get the work done. But my question is, when all was said and done, and you look at the amount of time, effort, and energy that's put into taking this elephant on of not only raising the funds, doing the work, designing the book, producing the book with the kinds of separations and paper that you want to use, but then the distribution and the selling of it. And Barry, it's a little bit different with you because you have a subject matter that, first of all, many press are going to want to write or talk about because they're going to get some free Bruce Springsteen pictures. I mean, it's a whole other kit and caboodle. You're
Yep.
dealing with Springsteen. Lou has a project that, in my opinion, there are certain artists, whether it's Alicia Keys or Puff Daddy, who do fund projects such as yours, Lou. I don't know if anyone you ever went to suggested, you know, a route to go about getting that. But my question really was, when you look at your time and energy, which went into manifesting this book, do you feel that it was financially rewarding enough even for you to do another book and not have to go through this?
Yes, it was, but, and your question is about all the ancillary paying Eric for prints and the book and the printer and all of that. Yes, it's a wash though. We didn't make the kind of money that Barry did. We made just over our goal, and we budgeted, and we found that, and yes, it was, no money came out of my pocket.
I think that's really terrific, because you manifested something that leaves a record and educates
That's right.
people.
Now I'm gonna put one other little caveat, is that my assistant, who's not here, hates it when I say this, but we call ourselves Ghetto Studio.
Yeah.
Because we think through how to do these things on smaller budgets, how to get people to get the highest quality. You know, Eric has been an angel for this entire project from the very beginning, for all of the ways that he's figured out how to do the things we need to do to get these rewards to people and to help fund this project in such a way that by raising the money that we raised through Kickstarter, and it was a wash. You know, I didn't make, again, like I said, I'm not paying for my mortgage with the money, but we paid for all the salaries, we paid for the trips, we paid for the airfares, we paid for the book publishing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with that, and we could not have done it otherwise.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah.
Oops. How about, Eric, do you want to move on? Maybe, I think Leanne, do you see Leanne's question in the question area there?
Why don't you take that one, if you don't mind? What does it say?
Yeah, it says, so Leanne asked, and she's asking us to speculate a little bit here, I think. Do you, just for the panel, it says, do you think that, you know, given the state of the world these days, that now is a good time to basically launch a Kickstarter project, or have you missed the boat?
Great question. I think I have two parts to that answer. I think one, now would be a good time, because if you're quarantined or staying at home, you know, you've got some time to develop it and work on it, which is nice. But the other thing I think that has value is, at least my take right now, is we're seeing some great creative contribution going out there. People are doing some really unique things as far as sharing what they believe in, what they want other people's, what they want to share with others, you know. And the creative world is full of people who want to talk about stuff that excites them. So I think, to that point, there's people out there who are maybe more open to hearing what other people have to say. I mean, we've been watching, you know, everything from at home made music performances to some great presentations about the work. Lynn, you being one of them, I've been enjoying your presentations very much. But people, I think, are very open to like, you know, helping people out right now. And I think if you have something to offer and people see value in it, they may, you know, want to chip in. Now, of course, the other side of it is there's a world that's being tremendously hurt financially right now. So I don't know where that would affect it, but you know, I don't think it would be a bad time at all to tap into that.
Lou?
To bring a little bit more of the daily, I am a believer that the world now, when people say that photography, well, you know, is dying or it's very difficult to make a living, all of these technologies have increased our ability to be more creative. And Kickstarter is just a godsend for creative people to fund these kinds, and a lot, as Barry said, a lot of the most creative, the magazines and newspapers are not doing the great job that they used to maybe or never did, but the artists are continuing to make great work. Kickstarter being a vehicle that we did not have 10 years ago that gave us the ability to do things. And so that in and of itself is, as Barry said, a very, very good thing. But if we put this pandemic on it, I'm not convinced that it's a good time right now to start to reach out and try to mount a campaign. I may be completely wrong about that, but I'm not sure that at this immediate time is a great time. We might have to see how this all falls out a little bit more before you launch into something that will take up most of your time.
I would suggest maybe because I kind of agree with Barry, and so I think there are two things working here. So Leanne, if you're thinking about a Kickstarter, now would probably be a great time to start organizing it. It may not, and get everything together, because if you have the time and the bandwidth to really focus on it, I would suggest, you know, definitely get it all together, and you have time to do that part. And maybe by mid to late summer would be the time to launch it. Maybe from a pandemically speaking, I would say you might be able to consider doing it later, just because I think the financial people might be worrying financially or whatever.
I would also go on to Kickstarter's website and Indiegogo's website and see what kind of campaigns are on there and which ones are doing well. Before this, I went on Kickstarter's site, and there was somebody that had made a cat toy. And the cat toy goal was, I think, $6,000, and they were already up into 6 digits. But, you know, I think that kind of speaks to the situation we're in right now. People are spending a little bit more time with their cats. So I would do that as well. I think that at this point, we've had some good questions, and we're kind of coming to the end of our time here. So what I want to do is, before we wrap this up, I need to give a shameless plug to ourselves. And I want to say that basically that, you know, Barry and Lou, and also in our Kickstarter, as part of the pledge process, we offered prints. And we worked with Barry and Lou on, you know, providing fulfillment for those prints, and which made it easy for them. They didn't have to worry about shipping or sending stuff. They just basically, we produced them and sent them. They both probably got cramps in their hands from signing, but you know, I think that that's a small price to pay. And we also work with them on price and everything else. So if you've got an idea for a Kickstarter campaign or anything else that involves a photographic print, we'd please ask that you give us a call. And then the other plug I'd like to say is that we're going to have more of these webinars. And also, if you're signed up for our emails, we're also we've already done one kind of how-to video that you can sign up to receive that was very good on converting black and white images. And we're going to have another one on an easy way to calibrate your digital camera so you get a color calibrated output. And that's going to come up probably next week. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for being here today, both Barry and Lou, and also thank you both for your contributions to the photo community as a whole. And Eric, do you have any other parting words before we sign off here?
No, you know, appreciate those of you that joined, and we're excited that we've got a couple of new things coming down the pike for online printing that we'll be announcing soon. and then be doing some webinars on that as well. It's a great new tool for uploading files for getting your prints. So we look forward to communicating that out shortly. And just to let you all know from a production standpoint, we are going to begin a staggered opening beginning next Monday on the 18th. So we will be having people coming into the lab one at a time. I want to ensure everybody's safety here. But we look forward to being able to be back in production very soon. So please reach out to us if you have any needs. We really appreciate the support in the business. And I know the entire team at DSI is looking forward to getting probably out of their houses and off of Netflix. So
yeah. And we're going to send out a follow-up email with links to Barry and Lou's campaigns and some other links to other information that was mentioned in the webinar. So thank you all.
All right, stay safe, everybody. Be well, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.